Thanks for joining this month's webinar. If you joined us on our Combating the War for Talent webinar, you'll know we do our best to pack as much relevant information into the time that we have as possible. Emma and I have put together this webinar based on feedback we've received from a number of our clients, and we do hope you find it useful. If you do have any questions at all, please feel free to email them to kerry@appointmentspersonnel.co.uk, or you can call the office on 01782 338787 at the end of the webinar. Now, unfortunately, Emma cannot join us today. She's been called to a client meeting. But if you do have any questions I can't help you with, I'll get Emma to get in touch. And for you, those of you that don't know me, I'm the founder of Appointments, and I currently work with a select number of businesses on developing their recruitment strategy. We work in partnership with Emma on all HR related issues. So again, if you do have any HR questions, we can put you in touch with Emma who could help. Okay, so let's move on to today's content. So today is all about having a legally compliant recruitment process, and I'll be covering the above topics throughout the webinar. And the anti-discrimination laws apply throughout the process, and this is something everyone needs to be mindful of. So from the outset, it's important that you are mindful of the 9 anti-discrimination laws, and all applicants are to be considered for the position you're offering, and they all enjoy protection against discrimination. So it is against the law to reject a candidate based on their sex, so i.e. whether they are male or female, transgender, are pregnant or on maternity leave. So if a candidate discloses they're 3 months pregnant and is able to do the job as is the other person, and you choose the other person based on the fact that she is not pregnant, this would be classed as discriminating. Maybe you interview somebody and ask the question whether or not they're married or single. This again would be discrimination if you choose the person based on their marital status, their race and colour, religion or beliefs, sexual orientation, age or disability. Now, I've come across a number of businesses who think these laws apply only when they've interviewed a candidate face to face. This is not the case. Please be warned, they do apply straight from the beginning of your recruitment process. So that's the place we're going to start right now, and that is ensuring your adverts are legally compliant. I know it can be really easy to make mistakes with your adverts if they've not been checked by someone with the right expertise. And as you can see from above, the businesses that wrote these ads were a little bit careless. To confirm, the advert on the left is asking for young applicants. This would fall under the age discrimination law. I found the advert on the right only last night, and the concern here is they are asking for a recent graduate. And I really feel that this could be misconstrued as indirect discrimination based on a graduate only recently qualifying, thus interpreting that you're asking for somebody that is younger. Without going into too much detail onto how to write an ad, the focus should be on the essential skills and credentials to do the job rather than the type of applicant that you are looking for. So employers should avoid language that could be construed as indicating a preference for applicants based on age, gender, race, religion, and other characteristics. And education requirements should be necessary for job performance or business needs. And employers posting requirements that are unrelated to their legitimate business needs may violate discrimination laws. Other recommendations are to use gender-neutral language, avoid age-biased terms, include essential job functions, and ensure that there is equal opportunity for applicants with disabilities. And end the advert with the phrase that you are an equal opportunity employer. Okay, so that's, I think, it for adverts. So take a look at the 2 adverts there. I'm sure none of you are making those mistakes, and as I said, be mindful that the laws apply right from the beginning of the process. So the next topic is about application forms. Now, if interviewing is not your main job, you might find that you have to shoehorn interviews in. Maybe you're doing 101 other things. And if you're a smaller business, you might not have a specific application form for the candidate. And I do come across a number of clients that simply write on the candidate's CV or on a notepad rather than the application form. And of course, some people do think an application form is old hat. And whilst I agree that they can be time consuming, there are ways in which to use them that I would not recommend sending an application form out in the post. Obviously, that prolongs the process. But the advantages of an application form are that you're receiving the same information from each individual, thus reducing the risk of breaking one of the 9 laws we showed you above. The use of an application form is considered good practice, as this is a standardised form where the applicant can provide all relevant information and it will be confirmed by the applicant that the information is correct. So either by way of a signature when the candidate comes into you, or online where they're ticking the box to say that they agree that the information they've provided is correct. And there are basic pre-employment checks that have to be completed by law, and the job application form should provide the majority, if not all, of the information required for your pre-employment screening. Now, remembering the 9 laws, we can make sure these apply through the application form too. So make sure all of your questions are legally compliant if you're going to use them on the form. Now, a question I get asked quite a lot is, can I ask for a candidate's date of birth on the application form? Now, there's nothing in the age provisions of the Equality Act 2010 that expresses or prevents employers from asking job applicants for their date of birth. However, asking for such information may give the impression that the employer discriminates or may discriminate on grounds of age. Now, employers should think about why they need to ask this question. Do you really need the information at the application stage, or is it simply the case that they've always asked for it? If it's the latter, then they should probably consider altering the practice. You can always obtain a successful applicant's date of birth later. Alternatively, the date of birth could be requested on a separate part of the application form that you use for monitoring purposes, which should not be provided to your managers who are making the recruitment decisions. Now, here at Appointments, all of our applicants complete an online registration form and are then interviewed face-to-face before we represent them to our clients. So my recommendation is to have an application form, even if it is quite basic. Now, you can find a few templates online if you need, or I'm sure if you want to call the office, we'll be able to help you out with some advice on the application form. Okay, so the next topic is unconsciously bias. And I find this quite an interesting topic when you're interviewing a candidate, because I think we all are critical of this. An unconscious bias refers to a bias that we're unaware of and which happens outside of our control. It's a bias that happens automatically, and it's triggered by our brain making quick judgments and assessments of people and situations. And these are influenced by our background, cultural environment and personal experiences. So basically, along the way, when you've been with your peers, when you've been managing people, we start to build up impressions of people along that period of time. And the point here is you could be being biased without actually realising it. And some tips here are to question your first impressions and review your thoughts and make your decisions based on facts, not what you are seeing in front of you. And our bias affects us and our decision-making processes in a number of different ways. Perception, attitude, behaviours, attention, listening and micro-affirmations. So the perception is how we see people. Attitude is how we react towards certain people. And behaviours is how receptive or friendly we are to them. Attention is which aspects of a person we pay most attention to. Listening is how much we actively listen. And microaffirmations are how much or how little we comfort certain people in certain situations. Now, whether we are aware of it or not, each and every one of these things will affect who we select for interview, how we interview them, or then who we hire, and our reasons for hiring them. By being unconsciously biased, we could be discriminating. Now, this is a really big topic and one I could talk about for a lot longer, but I appreciate everybody is short of time. So you can read more about this unconsciously biased topic on our blog. Just go to www.appointmentspersonnel.co.uk/blog. Okay, so the last part of our webinar is all about questions you can and cannot ask at interview. Now, each slide has a can't say and a can say, and I'll go into each slide in a bit more detail as we go through. So our first law is place of birth, ethnicity or religion. Now, employees should steer clear of any questions regarding a candidate's birthplace, background or religious affiliation. If an applicant has an unusual name, don't ask about their origin, as the answer could be possibly grounds for discrimination. Now, while it is legal to ask about ethnic background on application forms, this is for monitoring purposes only and usually anonymous and should never be brought up at interview. You may want to ask about religious practices to find out about any scheduling conflicts around weekends or religious holidays, but you should never ask a candidate about their beliefs. I will be able to send over the slides, so if you would like a copy of the slides, you can email me, kerry@appointmentspersonnel.co.uk, and I will send the slides over to you at the end of the webinar. Okay, our next is marital status, children or sexual preference. So asking question about someone's children is usually just making conversation and obviously quite polite and something that we start to engage in, especially if we've got children ourselves. But it's not appropriate in an interview setting. You cannot ask a candidate if they are planning a family, if they're pregnant, or anything in relation to their childcare arrangements. This also applies to questions about marital status, which could be grounds for discrimination, as some employers may believe that married employees are more stable, or single people may have more time to devote to the job. So any mention of an applicant's sexual preference should also be avoided. Okay, so next we have gender or age. So here we need to steer clear of any questions that reference a candidate's age or gender. You should certainly ask about their ability to handle the challenges of the role, but never imply that their age or gender may affect this. The only question regarding age which is acceptable is to establish whether they are a minimum age requirement for the role. And a prime example of what not to say as an applicant would be to ask of someone in their 60s, and how many more years do you see yourself in the workforce? So we've got a few things there, what we can and can't say. Next, we're moving on to disability and illness. An interview should be careful around any questions related to illness. Asking a candidate to explain any gaps in their CV due to long-term sickness leave is acceptable. But asking directly if they have had any health conditions is not. Questioning a person over a disability and whether or not it would affect them doing their job is grounds for disability discrimination. And our final question is around lifestyle choices. So here we've got, do you belong to any clubs or organisations? And we can say, are you a member of any professional group that's relevant to this role? Now, it is illegal at interview for employers to ask job seekers any questions relating to personal lifestyle choices. For example, about their consumption of alcohol, whether they smoke or use recreational drugs. Now, of course, a company can set out rules regarding the use of these kinds of substances and state what is and what is not permitted at work within the staff handbook. However, what an employee does outside of work and work time is not the company's business, and therefore no questions can be asked about it at interview. Now, a slide I haven't actually put on here, but is another interesting topic, is about whether or not you should look up your applicants on social media. Now, I'm sure we all find curiosity gets better of us, and we might have a look on social media, but what we mustn't do is use that evidence as a way of making a decision of who or who we don't recruit. Okay, and finally, you've gone through the whole process. You've done a compliant advert. You've got an application form that's compliant. You've done a compliant interview. You now have post-interview. So you need to be keeping your notes for at least 6 months. Job applicants have the right to see interview notes if the notes are either transferred to the computer or form part of a relevant filing system. So the Data Protection Act 1998 places responsibilities on employers to process personal information that they hold about job applicants and workers in a fair and proper way. So my recommendation here is to write up your notes concisely, have a scoring system, and interview everybody with the same questions and with the same scoring mechanism, and to ensure that your notes are kept and filed. So that leaves me just to say thank you. Thank you for attending. And to summarise, be aware of the 9 anti-discrimination laws at every point of the recruitment process. And as I've said, if you do have any questions, please feel free to contact myself or Emma, or if you'd like a copy of the slides. We will be having an ebook that goes along with this webinar, so everything will be documented in there, and that will be sent out in the next week or so. So please look out for that. And also I mentioned our blog where you can look at the unconscious bias. So I hope you found it of great interest. Thank you very much for listening, and I look forward to seeing you on our next webinar.